Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's week is off to a good start. My name is James Vancini, one of the original founders of Netreo, and today we're going to be going through a few of the quickest ways to improve your application, systems, and network management in healthcare IT. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please enter them into the questions section of the GoToWebinar interface and we'll answer them at the end. Now let's get started. So what are the common challenges we see in healthcare IT? Application sprawl is a common theme in healthcare IT. A large number of applications serving different groups and teams, or in some cases, different facilities, and trying to manage all these applications for multiple stakeholders. This is an ongoing challenge with most healthcare environments. One of the other common issues we see is that despite having multiple tools in place, teams often have very limited visibility beyond the immediate problem, what we call an up-down alarm. So it doesn't provide enough information for them to isolate the root cause and see all the other systems or applications it might be affecting. This is going to slow down recovery and create more issues between the teams. In the meantime, different teams and subject matter experts are consulted, each considering different alerts and using different tool sets, ultimately arriving at different conclusions as the outage continues. So the more tools you're dealing with, the more likely they are to contradict each other and create finger pointing between teams, which helps no one. This lack of communication can also cause multiple teams to each try resolving the issue on their own, which at best causes a lot of wasted and redundant efforts and can also cause new problems or obscure the original causes. So one of the keys is to get a complete picture, to get everything into a unified view. And the single pane of glass is something that's often talked about and rarely successfully implemented. Many organizations spend a lot of money and time trying to achieve it, but if they're using the wrong approach, it's like trying to cut down a tree with a hammer. You might get there eventually, but it's exhausting and it takes a lot longer than it should. But it really doesn't have to be that difficult. You just need the right tools and processes in place to make sure that it works for your environment. In a healthcare environment, you're likely going to have isolated segments for compliance and security reasons, so make sure that the monitoring system can support distributed collection for the data, including logging, traffic analysis, and application testing. This allows you to not only scale those services and keep traffic local, but also gives you a secure and easy way to make sure that nothing is missed on the unified view. You'll also want a way to make sure that less technical executives and clinicians have an easy way to see that everything is working, or to see when there's a known issue that you're working on. This helps to reduce redundant knock reports and foster an environment of transparency. OmniCenter's strategic groups functionality was invented specifically for this purpose, allowing you to group arbitrary devices and services together to create a holistic view into all of the different moving parts required to deliver an application, and then aggregate those together to create an easy to understand overview. And we'll go into more detail on that later. Also, having a single unified view helps to create a shared reality that improves communication between the different teams and speeds up recovery time. So one of the principles that we use here is to try to keep this data visible. So don't hoard the data, make it accessible to everyone. By making the monitoring data available to everyone in the value stream, everyone gets that common view of reality, which is going to help communications and demonstrates transparency, which enhances trust. OmniCenter makes this really easy to do with custom dashboards and unauthenticated access pages you can configure to allow your performance and monitoring data to be totally self-service. Some other useful ways to share this data include things like APIs for integration with your existing tools or dashboards, share pages, and information radiators. An information radiator is just a fancy name for a very simple system. It's designed to display important status information in a public area. For example, a monitor on the wall of a hallway that everyone walks through. Your command center can display metrics using OmniCenter's custom dashboard functionality in order to share useful data with the team, status data and current incidents to be sure, but you can also include other metrics like response time, application status, scheduled maintenance, key performance indicators to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Using information radiators also allows us to actively demonstrate some important core values, namely that the team has nothing to hide from visitors, customers, stakeholders, and the team has nothing to hide from itself, that it acknowledges and confronts problems rather than tries to sweep them under the rug. One key to making the self-service work is to make them simple to understand. So our strategic groups functionality allows you to group arbitrary systems together, as I mentioned before. So all of your servers, switches, load balancers, databases, storage facilities, all that can be grouped into a single score that we can then roll up to make a very easy to understand 0 to 100 metric. And you can also monitor and plot that over time to see trends, find anomalies, or to manage service level agreements. You can also control how each metric is weighted. So only the key metrics or services on each system get counted. So these numbers reflect the reality of how the applications are doing. And systems can be part of multiple groups. So you can have one group for storage that the SAN team focuses on, but the storage arrays can also be part of each application that depends on them, so your app teams can see when a problem might be coming from there, and that'll help cut down on resolution time. You can also combine multiple groups into aggregate groups, so by the time you get up to the CIO's dashboard, she can have a single metric that just says network or security or clinics and know immediately if all is well or if something is being worked on that you're already aware of. OmniCenter's auto configuration rules also let you do this without adding any admin overhead. So those auto configuration rules, they work by automatically adding newly commissioned systems to all the right groups based on any criteria that you want, such as system name, description, open ports, or even what services are set to auto start. It comes with a set of rules to help you get started, and you can easily customize or create new rules to fit your environment. This makes sure there's no manual provisioning process so that the devices end up in the correct reports and they always get the right settings applied. So the auto configuration rules can drive not only the grouping, but the groupings then can drive template settings to make sure that all of the different alerts and service checks, application checks, thresholds are all set the way that you want them for that specific group, and that those are enforced across all of the different devices as they're discovered by the system. So as new devices are discovered or added, the rules will automatically be applied to those systems. And you can also reapply those rules as desired or required. So if you want to make sure everything stays configured properly, you can enforce that using the rules. This is critical for making sure that the monitoring stays in sync with the environment as things change without adding a lot of additional burden to the IT staff. The second big key is to centralize operations. So what do we mean by that? Well, most of your organizations will already have a centralized command center or at least a NOC of some kind. And our experience shows that in healthcare specifically, there's often still a lot of independent teams running different applications or systems that are kind of doing their own thing, doing their own monitoring, or that are operating outside of the command center's purview. And if this isn't the case for your organization, congratulations. But for most, this is an ongoing struggle. So it's critical to have well-documented procedures for the command center's role in monitoring, change management, disaster recovery, escalation, incident, security, event, and problem management. And those procedures must be followed by everyone. There should be no exceptions unless they're specifically documented in the procedures, because consistency is really the key to consistent excellence. You should also have well-documented guidelines for the different severity levels. So these will determine how each outage is treated, the types and frequency of notifications, and the escalation points. Ambiguous definitions here may result in insufficient or excessive notifications and escalations, and that inevitably leads to extended delays in problem resolution. Frequent reviews should also be performed to make sure that the guidelines are properly implemented. You should also make sure to centralize all the monitoring through the command center. All the systems and applications that are critical to the operation of all the different supported facilities, groups, applications should be monitored centrally. That allows the command center to quickly determine whether a problem is global in nature and speeds up the recovery process. So knowing which alerts are outstanding when a major problem occurs helps to identify the proper support teams to engage and reduces the length of the problem. And be sure to share this information across all the teams like we discussed earlier. So some of the other best practices for centralized operations, and a big part of making that command center successful is to automate and standardize the monitoring tools and methods. So with OmniCenter, we use templates and auto configuration rules to allow you to fully automate all of the best practice monitorings so nothing ever gets missed. You can also use advanced API auto discovery to detect and add monitoring on new production systems automatically as you deploy them, so you're never depending on an unreliable manual process. Every alert that the command center receives should be acted upon. And if alert isn't going to generate a response, eliminate it and use reports to maintain visibility after the fact without disrupting the team. If too many alerts are generated, you can use tools like OmniCenter's baseline reporting or incident history logs to identify the sources, what we call the noisy birds, and correct them so that alerts are only triggered when there's an actionable issue. And we'll talk more about streamlining alerts later. You should also make sure that you're automating the initial response to alerts, such as restarting services or rebooting servers, or even just logging into the systems to dump diagnostic information when a problem happens. This will reduce manual interventions and can go a long way to speeding up the recovery time. In general, you probably shouldn't allow your individual teams to use standalone products if there's any alternative. I mean, it's okay to let them use in-depth diagnostic tools if required, but for general monitoring, you should avoid it as it adds training burden and can lead to finger pointing like, well, your tool shows the application isn't responding, but our tool says it's fine. Also, don't allow manual checks for the application. And this should really be obvious, but you'd be surprised how often we see this. Relying on someone manually checking application functionality causes delays and has the potential for extended outages. Operators should be automatically alerted when an exception occurs that may impact application functionality. And really beware of support teams who want to perform their own monitoring exclusively. It's perfectly okay to let them have a view of what the command center sees, but it's not okay to let them perform monitoring instead of the command center. Teams that perform their own monitoring with no oversight tend to hide their dirty laundry. They also tend to apply temporary fixes. And as a result, you have more outages, longer outage times, and a higher percentage of recurring outages. Because there's no oversight, senior management is usually unaware of the number and scope of the outages. But when the command center performs the monitoring, it serves two main purposes. First, the command center is able to quickly determine whether a problem in one area is affecting other areas. So for example, if a communication line goes down and several applications suddenly go red at the same time, the command center staff will know which support teams to notify first, whereas a team monitoring its own application may not be aware of the communications failure and will waste valuable time trying to diagnose the problem. The second purpose is transparency. Teams that are being watched by others tend to run better with fewer problems. And when something breaks, they tend to find a permanent solution so that the same issue doesn't recur. One of the keys to getting faster recovery times is to automate the alert response, as we mentioned earlier. So this allows you to take appropriate actions in the event of a failure or even unusual network behavior by automatically executing commands on devices or sending API calls to your applications or cloud providers. Of course, if you're not comfortable restarting servers automatically, you can also set the system up to manually execute the commands instead. For example, one of our customers set OmniCenter up so that it will automatically restart the server only outside of production hours or when the NOC isn't fully staffed. And then during production hours, it only notifies the NOC and they have to manually restart the service if that's how they want to handle it. But this helps to speed up the response, especially when you might be operating in a lower staffed NOC environment off hours. And if you are executing the commands automatically, make sure you use maintenance windows. It's very frustrating to try and upgrade a software package, and every time you stop the service to do the software install, the server reboots. If you use maintenance windows, which you can schedule in advance, and there's even APIs to allow you to integrate this into your regular change control process, those maintenance windows will prevent the execution of automatic commands on the system. It'll also flag them in the user interface so everyone knows it's a problem being worked on. It'll also subtract any outages that occur during maintenance windows from your uptime statistics so that you can show, 100% uptime for systems where there were no unplanned outages. Now, when we say automated exception detection, what we're really talking about is anomaly-based thresholds. And so in OmniCenter, the way we use that is we have anomaly detection to find changes in network or application behavior that you can apply on almost any setting, any monitored metric. So CPU, bandwidth usage, application traffic, even number of log messages. So if the application suddenly goes from 10 login failures an hour to 1,000, maybe there was a problem with that last software upgrade, maybe something changed on the back end. But at least now you have a starting place to troubleshoot, or you can automate a service restart to try to fix the problem. Anomalies can be detected based on changes in behavior, and they look at time of day and day of week or even hour by hour. So OmniCenter builds an automatic 8-week baseline for every monitored device and statistic to detect changes from usual behavior. And this allows you to find impacts you might not expect. Like maybe your migration to SD-WAN for the clinics caused an increase in CPU load on a critical application server that's related to increased latency. And the way you'd spot that is through OmniCenter's automatic exception reporting, where it detects the anomalies and can bring those to your attention, even if it's a setting that wouldn't normally generate a static alarm. So one of the examples that I like to use here is, maybe at this time of day on, Tuesday, we know that this particular set of networks is usually running about 20% utilization. Today, it's running at 5%. So that's never going to trip a static threshold alarm, but it might represent enough of a change in network behavior that it's something you want to go investigate and figure out what's going on or what changed or what got rerouted. The third key is eliminating alert fatigue. So the most critical key is making sure you're not spending all your time putting out fires at the expense of dealing with real business requirements and moving the organization forward. And the most effective way to do that is to reduce the alerts you're sending out of the system. Too many alerts is actually just as bad as not enough alerts. And the way that we like to do that is by reserving alerts only for things that are truly immediately actionable. Metrics that are just good to know should be eliminated from real-time alerts completely and mercilessly. Because if you're not going to actually react to the alert, don't send it. Instead, use reports. For example, if you're not going to immediately intervene for a high CPU on one server in a cluster, perhaps you're better off getting a daily or weekly report so you can keep an eye on it without waking someone up in the middle of the night to go try to fix it. OmniCenter makes it really easy to automate and schedule those reports, so you can make sure you don't miss ongoing trends that might indicate the need for environment changes, or to really allow you to get proactive and spot problems before they start impacting users and crossing critical thresholds. So step one to reducing the number of alerts that we're sending out is to create a monitoring policy. And if you don't have a monitoring policy yet, this is the obvious first step, because it lays the groundwork for what should be monitored and how to monitor it. And this is important because often technical teams will start with a monitor everything approach. This inevitably leads to millions of unread alert messages for things that don't trigger a response, overwhelming the teams in useless noise instead of useful, actionable information. It should also clearly outline the action and escalation contacts, timeframes, and methods of communication. So you should make sure that depending on the priority of the event, you very clearly document how to communicate with your team and what methods will be used and how you're going to keep all of the teams in sync. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. You should also make sure that you schedule a time to revisit the plan regularly. So this is going to depend somewhat on how fast your environment is evolving, but the pace of change in healthcare is typically relentless. So many organizations may need quarterly or even monthly revisions to keep up with the changes and make sure that it's still doing what you want for your environment. If the command center is going to act on all the alerts they receive, a big part of making that work is to make sure that the volume of noisy alerts that are coming in is minimized. And one of the best ways to do that is to leverage your tools to take advantage of automatic alert suppression technologies like root cause detection. By configuring a topology into the tools or letting the tool discover and map it, the tool can discover that the reason all the remote devices at a particular location suddenly went unreachable is because of a failure on the WAN router. And instead of sending out notifications for every remote device, like every switch, router, server, application, and wireless access point at that location, you can instead get a single alert that tells you right away that the problem is the WAN router in this example. We also use something called incident management rules, and this is how OmniCenter allows you to create advanced dependencies with the goal of reaching zero false alarms. So incident management rules allow you to easily override configured actions in order to send a customized alert, suppress a redundant alarm, or automate a specific response. Critically, this allows you to make sure that your alerts are going to the right teams at the right times, since different facilities and departments will have different teams to notify. You can easily create a rule, for example, that makes sure the DBA team is copied on any alerts that include the string database error in the description, even if the alert was originally headed for the SAN team. And as new applications roll out, you have a single point of administration to direct where these alerts are going. We generally recommend that as kind of a best practice, when you're sending alerts, that you send them to distribution lists and not individuals, because it makes it easier to keep in sync with personnel changes in the environment. And there's one less point of administration. I already have a SAN team set up in my Active Directory. I can use that distribution list instead of having to add or remove members of the team on a regular basis from my monitoring tool as well. You can also configure dependencies based on grouping. So for example, if you're seeing a bandwidth issue on a site, you can suppress any latency alerts that are going out for the same location, knowing that they're part of that same bandwidth problem. Or if you're running a cluster of systems, you can take a different action based on the status of other cluster members at the time. So during a mass outage, you need to be able to reliably communicate what is going on to all the teams and stakeholders. So your command center procedure should address exactly how you're going to get the notifications out, especially factoring the difficulties that are inherent in a mass outage. Email and SMS are usually the foundation that most notifications are based on, but these can be impacted during a crisis or simply saturated with alerts and notifications if we haven't fully implemented the techniques we've talked about to minimize them. So you should consider alternative methods. For example, mobile app push notifications take a path that is entirely separate from email, and these can even be initiated from the cloud, so the state of your internal networks or systems won't affect it. You can also use API integration into team communication platforms like Slack or Spark, Bittrex, or others to make sure that all the members of the team are aware of what's being done when and by whom. It also creates a convenient log for when a particular remediation effort was tried, like when the server was restarted or when a particular service was stopped. You can put all that into your team communications and then go back and use that log to help create forensic analysis as well. Now, you should also leverage any existing operational systems that you have. So integrating with things like notification managers can simplify on-call schedules and provide a way to distribute alerts that isn't dependent on internal mail infrastructure, for example. And many organizations are also going to be using some kind of ticketing or ITSM service like ServiceNow. And you'll want to make sure your plan includes how these tools should be used during a crisis and how to integrate them with your monitoring and alerting systems. So now I'm going to take just a few minutes to demonstrate how easy it is to create report automation in OmniCenter, and also how to create strategic groups in order to create a custom dashboard for a specific team. So give me just 1 second here to switch over to my other application. Okay, so this is the main user interface for OmniCenter, and if you haven't created a custom dashboard, when you log into OmniCenter, you'll typically land on this page, which we call a consolidated dashboard. It kind of gives you an overview of all the different things we're monitoring. But I'm going to give you a quick example of how we can create a custom report and automate that report really easily. So OmniCenter's interface is designed so that almost any of the different statistics that we're using in the tool can easily and quickly be mined for data without a lot of specific training required. So I can go in here, for example, and pick a particular category of devices and go in here and then take any of the different statistics that we're monitoring on those devices and just quickly come up with a report that says, for example, show me all inbound bandwidth on my remote routers. Now it's going to generate that report and kind of give me a sample of it, but I can go in here and customize how I want to see that report look. So maybe I want to look at the last 24 hours and I want to look at that by an average, but I want a stacked histogram so my outliers will stand out really easily. And it'll create that report for me so I can quickly see exactly what is going on with those different interfaces and who's using up all the bandwidth. And then all I have to do is click email and schedule. I can create a custom report, either add this to an existing report, or I can make a new report and then add this as the first page of that report. So basically any of the different reports I'm looking at in the tool can instantly be added into a custom report. We're going to call this our site bandwidth report. It's going to create that custom report, and then I can go in here and see that now that report has been created. It has one section in it, and I can go in and create a schedule to automatically send that out to any number of different email addresses and select the format that I want. So if I want to go ahead and send that to me, I'll send that to james@netreo.com, and I'm going to send that out daily at midnight because it's the last 24 hours, or I can customize the time frame and say, actually, what I want to do is last 7 days and have that go out weekly. You can then select the format and just create the schedule. And just that simply, I've created a schedule that's going to automatically send me that report. If I want to add another page to that report, I can just go to any other report in the tool. So I want to go in and do a monthly uptime report, for example, to say all my different sites, looking at working hours only for last month, generate that report, and then just add that report into the same custom report schedule that I just created. So that site bandwidth report now includes a second page for my site uptime. And just that simply, I can automate those reports. So the real goal here is to make it so simple to create and automate those reports that I can actually get away from relying on that real-time alerting for things that are just nice to know or things that I want to keep an eye on, but I don't necessarily want to flood the command center with alerts for. The second thing I wanted to demonstrate just quickly is creating those strategic groups like we talked about. So in OmniCenter, there's a number of strategic groups that are automatically created, and I can go in and customize those groups or change the criteria used to assign devices to them, or make a new strategic group. So if I've got a particular application I want to do, I'm going to call this my EHR application. I can create that application and then customize exactly what's included in that particular application. So when I go in here and edit it, I can actually pick which devices I want to add into that application. So I can go in here, for example, and pick specific servers, search for a particular type of device. Like I know these are going to be my Windows servers. I want to add those into my application. And once I've got that looking the way I want it, I can actually go in and customize with those devices exactly what statistics on those devices are being monitored and how heavily a particular device is weighted. That'll go into calculating those percentages that we saw on the main screen. And then all I have to do if I want to create a dashboard for this is I can go into users, custom dashboards. I can create a new dashboard. I'm going to call this my CIO dashboard. Create that dashboard, go in and edit it. And within that dashboard, I can just drag and drop any of the different modules that I want to include. So if I want to have, for example, that strategic group, and I want to put some history to it, I can put that in there. I can put in the overview in here and just drag those directly onto my dashboard. Save that dashboard, and then I can customize the options for those. So I can say for this particular strategic group, I want to show, one particular group that I just created. I'm going to show my EHR group. And then for the histogram, I'm going to pick one here that's got more history to it. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my Windows servers because that's just going to have a little bit more history to look at. And then once those options are saved, I can go in and preview what that dashboard will look like, or even assign it to a specific user. So I can go in here and say, when this particular user logs in, I want them to be assigned that particular dashboard, and that'll become their home page that they go to whenever they click the home icon, and they can go directly back to that particular report. So it's very simple to create and manage those simplified views that I can then incorporate into kiosks or standalone views, or just give users their own self-service portal to get to it. Okay, so now I'd like to take just a moment to talk about who we are for those of you who haven't worked with us before. So Netreo has been around for 19 years and profitable since year one, providing easy to use and comprehensive network management systems for both private and public enterprises. We've won Monitoring Product of the Year from Network Computing 3 years running and made the Inc. list of fastest growing companies for the last 2 consecutive years. Last year, we did a private equity transaction to gain additional working capital and resources, as well as access to some very experienced business experts, allowing us to grow even faster. And our track record in enterprise business speaks for itself, with customers like Wells Fargo, Aon, Partners Healthcare, SpaceX, and many others, with whom we've maintained more than a 95% customer retention since day one 19 years ago. Now I'd like to take a few minutes to address any questions that you may have. If you haven't already, please enter them into the GoToWebinar interface. And I'm going to launch a poll now. So if you'd like us to follow up with additional information or contact you to discuss your unique environment, you can just click on the appropriate option in the poll, and it'll actually give you that option right now. Okay, so the first question we have is, how much historical data do you keep? So OmniCenter by default stores the last 3 years of historical data, and it does it by storing the high resolution data for a minimum of 100 days. So the highest resolution data is always available for all of the data in the last quarter. And that's one of the things that really enables us to use those anomaly detection at a very high level of detail and granularity to compare the most detailed data possible. It rolls up over time, and as you go further back in history, by the time you're out, more than, call it 6 months to a year, you're going to be looking at 4-hour averages, but that's the largest roll up that we use. So you can always be able to see the difference between day and night shifts and kind of see the progression of traffic throughout the day, or the progression of a particular statistic throughout the day. Second question, how does OmniCenter scale? So OmniCenter is available either as a physical appliance or as a virtual appliance, or as a cloud hosted system. Regardless, any of those different methods have a large number of scaling options, including hardware can scale up to 20,000 devices under management in a single appliance. And then you can cluster multiple appliances together and also add distributed collection appliances to be able to kind of reach unlimited scaling with that. And we've got customers who've deployed virtual appliances for 6,000 or 7,000, including high availability options, in their own clouds or in public clouds. And there's also a cloud-based option as well, although we rarely see that used much in healthcare because of compliance issues. Finally, last question, how is it licensed? OmniCenter is designed to be very simplistic to license and use. It's designed so that all of the licensing is a single device object. So basically any virtual or logical operating system counts as a single device. And within that device, you can monitor an unlimited number of services, applications, interfaces, metrics, etc. This makes it really, really easy to scale it to the size that you need and to understand exactly, how you need to add licenses when you add new divisions or when you bring on new facilities, just to make it as easy as possible and as easy to understand as possible without requiring a lot of, analysis to figure out how many licenses you're going to need in advance. Okay, so thanks very much for your time, and hopefully we've shown you a few keys today that you can use to improve your IT management in your organization. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us at info@netreo.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you right away. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.